Welcome. My name is Natasha Sherman, and I am your host. And this is part 2 of an interview with William Placek, or Will. He is the president of Pflag Jersey Shore and the North Atlantic Regional Director. Welcome back.
Thank you very much. And
Seth Rainess, who is a TEDx speaker, author, and educator. And he is the author of Real Talk for Teens, Jumpstart Guide to Gender Transitioning and Beyond. And Seth is a transgender male. Welcome back.
It's good to be back.
Yes. So I want to start with Pflag. I don't want to kind of bypass talking about that, and then I want to ask a lot of questions. So just say a little bit about the significance of Pflag.
I think that that's really important to tie into my personal story that I shared in your last segment.
Yes.
Because Pflag is an organization that is out there to serve families to try to build a level of acceptance for their LGBTQ plus children. And so I use my story to try to help families understand. Pflag is an organization that was formed when all the riots and marching in New York were happening, and a woman named Jean Manford walked in the streets holding a sign that said, stand up and support your gay children. And after that, all these individuals were coming to her and saying, can you speak to my parents? Mm-hmm. And so she started Pflag. So one person started this organization.
So 45 years ago or something?
Wow.
46 years ago?
I think we're going to be hitting 50 years.
Wow.
And so out of that built this national organization that has 400 chapters across the country.
And what do you do?
So in Pflag Jersey Shore, we provide support, and we do that through support groups and connecting with people and operating a helpline. We do education, speaking to people in the community, going to businesses and presenting to their workforce.
So there is an actual place, forgetting COVID, but there is an actual place where you can meet and come together.
Yes.
Right.
And we then provide advocacy.
Okay.
Where we work to try to impact change on behalf of LGBTQ people.
And explain what the Q is, because I didn't know what that was.
Q is queer or questioning. You know, many years ago, queer was used as a derogatory term, but a lot of gay people are really taking that term back. And so that some individuals, especially the younger people, are calling themselves queer. Mm-hmm. And so what we've learned over time is that all that is important is to accept somebody for who they are. And then if you tell me you're queer, then I'm going to call you queer. If you tell me you're a lesbian, I'll call you a lesbian.
That's great. You know, I was just thinking that when you talk about Pflag, so it doesn't mean if a parent chooses, and I'm talking to the parents now, if a parent, you know, is grappling with it and even has like, oh, no feelings, if they come to a meeting, it doesn't mean that they're saying, oh, it's okay, or they're coming because they want to know.
That's
and
right.
You can support them even in their resistance.
That's right.
And also, it's like in kind, because there may be other parents that could be a little further ahead in that journey, and,
Yes.
and it's really peer-to-peer support.
Yeah.
That's the key, is to have other families there to say, I've been where you've been. And yes, they may not walk out of that meeting that night and wrap their arms around their child and accept everything. But we recognize that families are there because they love their children. And that's what we need to capitalize on.
And yes, because the thing is, as a child, your experience of the world is predicated on your family loving you. And it's your first love connection. And so if your parents don't accept you, there's so much more. It's different if your friends don't or the neighbor doesn't. But I think, you know, it's so significant to create a supportive environment for people to come and explore and support.
Right.
And also, more than that, we have adults that now have kids. So maybe the father is either transitioning, or maybe they're gay and they're not married. So it works both ways now. They're seeing, you know, adults and also younger, the parents coming for the kids, but then maybe there are some kids, we haven't seen too many, we saw a few, where they came because their parent was either transitioning or they were gay, or they were getting divorced for whatever the reasons.
We're seeing a lot more young people.
Yeah. So I have a gajillion questions I want to ask you, but I'm going to just throw the most obvious ones. And I know things have changed from the past, and when you speak, you're speaking from your experience and what you know of what's going on, but there are people who live outside of that experience also. When we put your name up, you said, what were the pronouns?
He, him.
He, him. Okay, what is the significance of that?
So I asked you to add my pronouns. So when I introduce myself to people, I say, my name is William Placek and my pronouns are he, him. I have that in my signature on my email.
Why?
Because what is really important is that when I self-identify with those pronouns, I'm allowing those who are interacting with me to know that I'm welcoming and allowing and affirming you to be who you are.
Okay, so it opens a door, it gives permission.
And it also creates a space of safety and affirmation.
And not awkward, because sometimes you may come upon someone and you don't know if they're a male or female or whatever, or maybe they're non-binary. But when you see the pronoun, or when they see your pronouns, they already know that you know that already.
That you're aware.
And if you're not sure, and they don't say their name with the pronouns, you can just ask them what their preferred pronoun is. And this way, it lets down the guard a little bit.
That's great.
And we've actually, when we go out and educate businesses, we've really seen a lot of them add their pronouns to their email addresses.
Ooh.
And that's really helpful when the community is seeking services for them. You know, it allows people to know, hey, this person is going to be a safe person to speak to about the situation that I'm dealing with.
That's great. Okay, jumping to another question. So in our last interview years ago, you said something that I thought was very significant, and you lived as a woman in the corporate world, and you live as a man in the corporate world. And as a man, it's a much more privileged position.
It's different. It's absolutely different. And I wish, if you could go back and correct, I wish I could have lived my beginning corporate life as a man, because I saw how women got put down. And I worked in a corporation that's no longer in existence. They merged, but they were the good old boys. And I was probably smarter than all the men that I was working around, but it didn't matter, because whatever I had to say got poo-pooed. And again, being a nonconformist, okay, I mean, that ate me alive. And I used to talk to my mother about it a lot, and I just said, Mom, I'm not a corporate player. I can't do this. And maybe if I was a man, it would have been a different story, because the personality, the way I would come across, all seemed to fit in line. I wasn't the square peg in the round hole.
And you know, I think what's really significant about this is that you experience both. You're speaking from experience.
Yeah.
And in the same interview, I remember asking the question, do you think it's easier to transition from male to female or female to male? And Vanessa said, the other, female to male, because it's a world of privilege. So I want to bring that up briefly.
It's not only, I mean, I will say that you could say a world of privilege, but putting that aside for the moment, it's easier for a female to transition to man, because when you take testosterone, if that's what you choose to do, you're going to look like a man. Whatever you look like on the outside, it doesn't matter, because as soon as you start to grow facial hair, or God forbid lose your hair, you know, no one's ever going to call you she again. But when a male born at birth transitions to a female, and they've already gone after puberty, gone to transition after puberty, which is harsh, it's hard, because the facial hair is one of the hardest things to get rid of.
Plus
Adam's apple is already
There's so many different things.
There's so many different things, and it takes a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's why we're seeing these laws across the country that are, they're criminalizing physicians from treating children for transgender or gender dysphoria and giving them testosterone. I mean, it's being criminalized, and families are having to choose to move out of the state, leave their work, to be able to get their child the correct care. But it's so critical, like Seth said, to make sure that they get that at a young age, because doing that earlier sets them up for a more successful life.
But I want to tack on to what Will's saying, because there's misconception out there. People are saying, we're not going to do surgeries and hormones on young kids. They don't do that.
Right.
See, they don't do that. They watch the child if they're 6 or 8 or 10, and they watch that. And they don't do surgeries. If they're doing them illegally. They're not the people that we know in our area of surgeons who are very caring and dedicated. As far as the hormones, that doesn't happen till well into puberty, or give or take, whenever each child's different. If they choose to do that, everything's a choice. And surgeries don't happen at 10 or 12.
Right.
Right. Yes, and that's an important thing to add. And I think, you talk about being preemptive and doing, when they're, instead of going into puberty, they have puberty blockers.
Right. Which have been around for a long time, way before transgender people.
Right.
It's not.
That's the care that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And that's what they're preventing families from accessing.
Will insurance cover any of this at this point?
That's a loaded gun, because I think a lot of them do and some don't. It depends on your state. Depends on how every insurance company. I always say the squeaky wheel, and it also depends on the parents' insurance and whether the parents want to fight or the company, because the companies can put it on. It just depends on. I mean, it's really. Every question's a different answer for everybody.
I think a point out of that is the state. What state?
Yeah.
Right.
We're very lucky living in New Jersey.
Yes.
Because we have a lot of protections for the
Yeah.
LGBTQ
Right.
community.
Okay, next question. Bathroom issue. Who wants to?
Well, I understand what's going on. I get it, but I used to speak about bathrooms. And
What is going on?
And some states are turning back.
Back
if you're
to what?
born male and female, you need to go to the bathroom, which how you were born.
Okay.
When I used to speak about it, I was like, well, there's a man in the women's bathroom. Well, that person's in a stall, first of all. And if you're looking under the stall, who's got the problem here? So, I get it with schools, because I just had this conversation with a friend of mine and who's in Queens in the schools, and what it would be to turn the bathrooms and things, and you can have unisex bathrooms, but then all the other kids would go in it, and who's going to police this? It's more involved than just saying you can't do it or you can. Let's assume you can. There's a lot more work involved, and I think people should take an active part to make it happen.
What's the ideal?
Well, to me, everybody has a unisex bathroom in their house. So, but
Except you don't have strangers parading around your
right,
house.
and when they say with kids it's a safety issue, well, then that's what you have. You have a safety issue. It's not
Well, I
the
think the
trans kid.
ideal is that, first of all, the ideal is that people aren't policing who's going to the bathroom. Do you want to show your birth certificate or your license to walk into a public restroom?
No, but the question is, so I remember decades ago being in Japan, and they had, men and women in the
Right.
same, and everybody's just doing their business,
Right.
and the men are at the stalls, and no big deal. Nobody's looking, and so it doesn't have to be an issue of gender and
Right.
transgender and all of that. But we don't live in that society. So the question is that people posit, okay, I'm a female, and a man walks into my bathroom. Dressed as a woman, but clearly a man. And I feel a little nervous about it. What's the response?
It's a cultural issue, like you said. So so we have to educate people. That's first and foremost. Educate people and start changing minds. So that way, when they see that person who's in there and dressed as a woman, that they see that person as a woman. That's the ideal, is that they look at that person as the gender that they are presenting as.
Yeah, and I think and you may have talked about this in one of your talks. I think it's like this, almost to the ridiculous, like, who's going to dress up? How many people are going to dress up as a female to come into the ladies' room, There's always some aberration, and there's always some aberrational behavior, but most people are not going to dress up as a female just to get into
We've had more senators that were arrested in public restrooms for doing something than we've had any trans people.
Exactly.
And the other issue is, I mean, when this came up a few years back, 4 or 5 years, whatever it was, where's the statistic of the man who's really the man in the woman's dress? There's no statistics. Nobody has been arrested. They're making a mountain out of a molehill. And when you're a parent with little kids, you do go into the bathroom with your kids. You just do that anyway,
Yes.
to the point where they can where you feel comfortable letting them go into the bathroom by themselves. And
Never.
that's men and women's bathroom. Yeah, well.
Let me tell you, as a parent, when I had my sons who were young, the amount of places that do not have a changing table in the men's restroom.
Right.
So
yeah.
I'm a big advocate for unisex bathrooms because I can tell you how many
Yeah.
times I've walked into the women's restroom because I needed to change my child.
Yes, yes. The other thing is that I want to clarify, and it's not really a question, but just from my understanding. So, there's this misconception that a transgender choice is because of who you're attracted to, and transgender has nothing to do with who you're attracted to.
Right. I mean,
so I'd like you to speak to that.
And we get this question a lot. This is the biggest thing. There's sexual orientation, that's who you're attracted to, and there's gender identity, that's who you know yourself to be. And simply stated, we always say, gender identity is who you go to bed as, and sexual orientation is who you go to bed with. But a lot of people think, well, but if you transition, does that now mean that you're going to go with men, or that they don't change? I shouldn't say they don't change. They change for some people. I have my own beliefs as to why that would be. My belief is that if your orientation changes, it probably was not that in the beginning, but you weren't comfortable with your body, you weren't comfortable with everything, and now that you're comfortable, you're free to sort of love who you want, and maybe it didn't change, you just covered it up. That's how I feel. It doesn't mean it's true.
It makes sense.
But I find a lot of people that transition keep their orientation. I mean, if you're transitioning from with a marriage, that's a different story.
Who you're attracted to is who you're attracted to.
Right.
Whatever the body
and they're not
is
the
that you're
same.
in.
And they're not the same. They're defined differently because gender identity is formed when you're 18 months to 3 years of age. Now, you may not say anything about it, but that's when it's formed.
Right.
Okay. And sexual orientation, it could be 9 or 10, but it's usually around puberty.
Yeah. Okay. Next thing. So there's a difference between coming out and disclosure. You talked about that somewhere. And so coming out is you came out to your parents. Disclosure is saying to someone, I'm a transgender man. And you asked me to just refer to you, not in the context of the show, in the context of because we're doing the show for this purpose.
Right.
But just, I see you as a man. I don't see you any other way. Right. But I know you're a transgender man. And you said, I'm just a man. And I guess my question is, I had to grapple with that a little bit. My question is, at some point in your dating life, if you're getting serious about somebody, you're going to have to disclose. So it then is a disclosure that you are a transgender man. So what's the difference between that and being just called a man? There is some kind of a...
Well, because it's now crossing sexual boundaries, and some people haven't done surgery. Some people can present like this and they still have their female parts because that's what they choose to do. And now you're looking at me as you're a man and you're expecting to have sex and something's missing. But the funny thing about that is everybody uses all kinds of sexual paraphernalia. I think the more important question, of course, I'm older, so I'm different, but when you're talking about kids who are 12 and 14, and I still have some kids from the group that their parents will call me and want me to talk to the kids because they're now getting to that age. They're teenagers and they have all the teenager problems, and then this rejection and so the question is, do you tell someone up front on the first date this is how it is, you cut your losses, or you don't, or you come into it a couple dates and then you say something and then they think, well, you've been lying this whole time, I wasted my time, or they say, I don't care, I like you the way you are. There's no answer to that.
I think that something to kind of put that in context is, Natasha, when I first met you, you shared very little about who you were, what the purpose of our, contact was, but then today we sat down and we shared a lot of information about each other, and so you also chose to disclose.
Yes.
And so I think that that's something that can provide context to people. Yes, because what it is that we all decide how much we're going to share of ourselves.
It's a good point.
Right.
And so, I go to a store with my kid, and as I'm at the register, the cashier says, "Oh, Mom's got the day off," and I have to choose in that moment.
Oh, good.
Do I have to say, "Well, my husband is," or do I just not say anything? And before, that was a much easier choice. But now that I have my children next to me, I have to decide, what am I teaching them? And is my silence going to have them believe that there is something wrong with their family?
Wow.
So we all make those choices every single day.
Yes, you're right.
And it's different for the different ages that you are. You know, a teenager's going to approach it differently than someone's in their 30s and their 40s.
I want to kind of get something out before we end. And that is, I think we've talked, you know, Seth talked about being female and all the different things we've discussed. Really, what's so critically important right now is for people to advocate to get the Equality Act passed. So right now, there are basically 2 protections that LGBTQ people have in this country, across the country, and that is the right to marry, and that is the right to get and keep a job. There is no other federal protections across this country. So then we're left with the patchwork of laws, and when I cross a border, my safety, my life, my ability to access services changes.
So what are the specific things that you want to change? What are the specific laws?
So the Equality Act will add sex protections by sex, which, you know, will help.
What does that mean?
Well, first of all, it will help females who, you know, women who still do not have the same protections that men have. You know, Seth talked about that.
I still don't understand what you're talking about.
Okay, so there are so many laws that protect certain classes.
Okay.
So the Civil Rights Act was really something that was very powerful. The Equality Act will make that even stronger by saying it protects sexual orientation and gender identity under the guidelines of sex, which also includes females and also includes, you know, BIPOC people. So that's what's really critical, is that people advocate for that, because then that's a federal law.
Okay.
So it will protect across this country.
So what do you want people to actually do? What action
call
should
their
they take?
senators.
Okay.
You know, people need to be standing up. The most powerful voices for the LGBTQ community are straight allies. Those are the most powerful, because you're not standing there because you have a gay child. You're not standing there because you are gay or trans. You're standing there because you believe in the rights of an equality of all people. And that's what's really critical, because right now people can lose their homes. They can get married on a weekend, post a beautiful picture of their marriage on Facebook, and on Monday be kicked out of their rented apartment.
Are you serious?
Yes.
In New Jersey as well?
Not in New Jersey.
But in
other
New Jersey's
states?
Other states.
But there are other states that happens.
Okay.
And there
Now
are
I'm
people.
beginning to get it.
Yeah, I mean, people can be arrested and people can be discriminated against in so many aspects of their life. So we need the Equality Act to pass, because that will protect those people in Texas and in Tennessee.
And here's the thing, I just, you know, people have busy lives, and usually it takes some kind of a vested interest in order to take action. But it serves all of us to have that happen. And it's very easy nowadays to get information. You go on the internet, you find out who to call, you get the phone number, and you know, you could have all of this handled in half an hour.
I spent about an hour online with an organization. They literally told us who to call. They had a link for the state you lived in. They had a thing for you to say.
So they could call your, contact your Pflag.
They can call through Pflag. That we sat there, and I picked up the phone and I called the Capitol that evening, and I was done in that hour.
That's great.
So, but it's really important that we all engage our leaders in our communities.
It
to get
serves
this passed.
everyone. You don't have to, you know, yeah.
That's the whole point. It does serve everyone.
Thank you for making that point.
All people are not, you know, don't have the rights until everybody does.
Yes.
So nobody's protected until
they can hold
everybody
it from
is
somebody,
protected.
then they can hold it from you.
That's
it's
right.
just really that
That's right.
simple. Yeah. Thank you for making that point. Other question you know, questions not to ask, and I do remember this very clearly. People are very curious, and I remember in our first interview, people bringing that up, or I brought it up, I can't remember, you know, about body parts, especially after transition. And the thing is, people are curious, and there's nothing wrong with being curious. But it's like Vanessa, I think, said, would you go up to a straight person and said, do you have a penis or do you have a vagina? I mean, it's just not even polite.
That's right.
You know?
Or are you pregnant?
It's inappropriate, yes. So be curious, it's not your business.
Or educate yourself online.
Yes. Well,
There's so many other resources out there that can be helpful.
And I think part of that, I don't see that as much today as it is, and I think it's because there's been education about transgender people, where it wasn't Susie's mother's uncle's aunts who told
or
some kind of
something you
story,
saw in a magazine.
and that's all that they were focusing on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's really a man. It's really a man there and has a penis. They didn't talk about identity or anything else. And I think now that people are educated, I'm not saying some people still don't ask, but I don't seem to see that as much as
That's good to know.
it was. But that doesn't, that's just me. I mean, there's other people that can still experience that.
Okay, so you each get a minute. What would you like to say? Final words.
Final words. So I think what I would like to say is that Pflag is an organization that is really out there to help families.
Keep them
and
together.
we want them to, it's our whole goal is to keep them together. So if you are struggling with acceptance, if you think your child is LGBTQ and you want to learn, you want to connect with other families who can help you and support you, reach out to Pflag. You can go to pflag.org and that can tell you where a chapter is in the entire country. In New Jersey, we have 7 chapters. So from the north to the south and in between, Jersey Shore
So
is there to be
waiting
helpful.
for you.
We are there
Yes.
to help you. Just go pflag.org. My chapter is pflagjeraysshore.org, and reach out to us so that we can kind of connect you and speak to you, provide you resources. And our hope is that you will lead with love.
Yes.
You will learn to accept, and that your family, including your LGBTQ person, will live a healthy, happy, and successful life.
That's awesome.
So I'm just going to tack on a little bit to what Will said, since this is in Jersey, but even on the outsides of Jersey. I'm on the advisory board at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, the Gender, Development, and Sexuality Clinic. And they, it's a children's hospital, so it's from birth to 21. And a lot of people don't know where to go with the little kids. New Jersey's trying to, at this moment, I don't know of many doctors that are, they're maybe individually, they're sort of doing it, but it's not decided that this is the hospital that's going to do that. We do from 13-year-olds up. Just to be able to reach out, to know that there are places there, and even online, because again, if I Googled that 15 years ago, I wouldn't find anything, but there's a lot of good places out there that you can at least start. It may not be where you end up. Maybe your kid isn't transgender, but you know what? It's good to be on someone's radar and talk to someone who actually has the knowledge rather than someone down the street's uncle who is giving you misinformation, and now your head is spinning even more.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there in New Jersey.
Thank you. So William, Seth?
Yep.
Thank you so much. It's
Thank
been
you.
a true delight. Thank you for being authentically you and being willing to share your stories, and for your commitment to supporting other people.
Thank you. And anytime you want us back, we'll be here.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. My name is Natasha Sherman. Thank you for joining us.